let me just raise for you the issue of the cost of this. What is the cost? If Essex study gives us a glimpse into the scale of the problem, the shortfall that exists in many, many schools out there, maybe 24,000, maybe 25% of those, I don't know. Even if it's 25% of 24,000, that's a lot of schools. What is the cost? Well, I'd suggest that there are three aspects to the cost. First aspect is the cost in terms of health. We've heard about the health effects on students and on teachers of constant stress. The German study I mentioned earlier found that this level of constant stress from 65 decibels caused elevated heart rate. Elevated heart rate is not good for you. So the stress sets up all sorts of knock-on effects, psychological disorders, particularly in teachers. I don't know if you saw the, I think, not very helpful comment by the head of Ofsted recently about stress in teachers. And some of the responses by psychiatrists in the press who were writing in and saying they had dealt with hundreds and hundreds of teachers who did indeed suffer from psychological disorders as a result of the stress of being in that environment. There's little doubt that it does exist. Then we've got the vocal disorders that we've heard about, the kind of legal action that we've heard about, potentially the tip of an iceberg there. And the elevated heart rate I just mentioned is a really serious issue, because if you're in a loud, shouting environment, you have to shout the whole time, your heart rate goes up. If your heart rate goes up, it has an effect on your life expectancy. Now, we don't know, there's no numbers on this yet, but it wouldn't be unreasonable to posit that teachers who have elevated heart rates throughout their careers are losing quality of life, if not quantity of life, as a result of that. Something for the teachers' unions to take on, I would suggest. We need research on this. And just to back that up, this is a paper by Ising and Krupper which summarized the research on noise and health over 25 years. That's 25 years worth of scientific papers, all summarized in this one paper. Now, you can't read all of that, so I'm going to zoom in on the bottom. And you can see that they say, I'm going to leave aside the other risk factors. Let's assume that teachers are non-smoking and not overweight and very fit people, which I'm sure is absolutely true. The other stress factors which apply to them, are they under time pressure? Yes. Do they have control over the classroom all the time? No. So there's an issue which is a sort of multiplier going on there, and you can see that the short-term, the acute effects on health are well known from all of the research to include things like tension, annoyance, resignation, stress hormones, and so forth. Now, you've heard this several times. Here it is in the research. Over a period of time, that then feeds through to long-term issues, performance impairments which are not helpful in an educational situation, deterioration of short-term memory, and of concentration. So it's not a surprise that children under flight paths do worse than children who don't have that noise to put up with. It's not a surprise, it would not be a surprise if we find that acoustics of classrooms is really closely correlated with academic performance in pupils. Wouldn't surprise me at all. More research needed again. And the long-term health risks, well, in there it says myocardial infarction, that's heart attack. And just to back that up, what they said, and I'll read this out to you, is the threshold level for possible noise-induced risk of myocardial infarction has been established at a daytime emission level of 65 decibels. Remember that number? It's the average noise level in all those German classrooms. So teachers are getting 65 decibels, and it does potentially have heart consequences for them. That is going to the heart of the matter. Second major consequence or cost of this to us is just the cost in terms of education. I mean, it's such a waste. You remember the analogy I gave you of watering the garden and the water evaporating so that it's not all received by the flowers. So there's wastage involved, and that is because we have to go back and teach people again. We have to have teaching assistants sitting at the back of the class, relaying to the people at the back what the teacher said because they can't hear. It all costs money to do that. It's inefficient, and of course we get poorer results because pupils can't hear, they can't learn, they don't do so well. And it's not equal. We have established, I think, that there are certain groups who are particularly badly affected by this. Those with hearing impairment, absolutely. English as a second language, absolutely. And in fact, Richard just mentioned autism. So there are many other conditions which will be acutely affected, as well as, I've suggested earlier on, just introverts, people who don't like loud environments and don't do well in them. So it's not equal. Some are extremely disadvantaged, and it's unfair to them. And then the third class of cost to us is the social cost. Because when you turn people out of school from that environment, they've learned to shout, they have not learned to listen, and if we don't listen, we don't have empathy with each other. And if we don't have empathy, our behavior suffers. Listening is the gateway to understanding. And if we teach children in class not to listen because it's so loud and you can't, we're turning out people who are going to behave badly. And I don't think this is unrelated to some of the concerns that we have in our society at the moment. They're disengaged. They sat at the back, they didn't hear, they didn't feel part of it. You heard from our pupils the difference that good acoustics makes to that kind of feeling. So we turn out people who need to be looked after by the state. That costs an awful lot of money. And ultimately, GDP goes down because they're not working, and we lose all that potential, all those people who could have been useful members of society and are marginalized. So I don't know how big that is, but I suspect it's a pretty big effect. So remember, the process goes, high reverberation time leads to the Lombard effect. You just experienced that in there. Exactly that. 65 decibels, average noise level in the classroom. It sets up stress, and what we end up with is what you could call lossy education. Not very efficient. On the other side, you've got low reverberation time, and even better if it's right across the board, not just in a narrow frequency band. That leads to what we're calling the library effect, the opposite of the Lombard effect, where sound spirals downwards, the noise level spirals downwards, and we get a quiet room. And what we've seen from Adrian's talk and from the Essex study is that the drop can be 18 decibels if we get the reverberation time right. That's a huge drop in noise level from the Batod standard, the best standard. And what we get out the other end is speech clarity. That's what we want. So the solution? Well, I would suggest we look at some numbers here. I know Mari has said there is a standard and it doesn't have any numbers in it, but it would be very good to guide schools, teachers, governors as to what kind of numbers are useful. Something like 15 decibel headroom, that's what has been established from the research that children need in order to hear what's going on. So whatever the background noise level is, they need the teacher to be 15 dB above that. So we should be looking for classrooms with no more than about 40, and I think Adrian would probably say, and Trevor would probably say 35 decibels of background noise. 40 decibels of background noise plus 15 decibels of teacher, that gives you 55 dB, which is about like a normal office. You can talk over that in a conversational tone. It doesn't require shouting. So working sound pressure level of 55 dB would be great. Reverberation time, now you've heard this, this is the Batod standard. No frequency band above 0.4 seconds. So that gets the sound pressure level down by 18 decibels. What we get out the other end is better learning, better behavior, and better health. Those are worthy outcomes, I think you'll agree. This is the cost of treating one of those classrooms, retrofitting acoustics to get it to the Batod standard, £2,500 for the room. Once done, it's done. It goes on working year after year like that, pupils coming through it every year. What, you might wonder, is the cost of sending one child out of area. If it's a child with hearing impairment and you don't have the facilities to teach that child, you have to send them to another school that does have the facilities. Can you guess what the cost of that is? Well, if you don't know, this will shock you as much as it shocked me. £90,000 a year. That's average. It can be way higher than that for special needs children, can be lower, but that's the average that Essex are finding if they have to send a child to another school. £90,000 a year. How many classrooms can you fit for £90,000? My goodness. This is cost effective. So the action, just to leave you with some calls to action, and I hope that this event is going to prove to be a stimulus to these kind of actions. We need to set high standards. I would love to see, and I think you all in this room would love to see Batod across every British school. That's a noble goal. We would have a fabulous educational system in terms of acoustics if we could achieve that. That would cost a fair bit of money. If we have standards, we must police them. And it's fine if we're going to ask people on the ground and be big society about this, ask people to police their own standards, but they have to be able, first they have to know there's a problem. Secondly, they need to be qualified to measure and decide whether something can be done and what needs to be done. So we need to help them. Remedy the problems in our existing stock, build to standard. That's now happening. Great to hear Mari talking about the new schools being built to standard. Very exciting. And most of all, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what this event is all about, if this is going to happen, we need people marching in the streets about this. I mean, this is a big problem. And it means that we need to inform and inspire not technical people, not acousticians and architects talking to government, but we need to inform and inspire everybody who's affected by this. And that is to say, teachers, students, governors, everybody who's touched by this issue across the country. And finally, I just want to announce the launch here of one small contribution to that debate, and it's an app which Ecophon have paid for and we've made. It's an app called Study. It's in the iTunes store as of today and also in the Google Android shop. And it's an app which plays 45 minutes of sound. It's designed particularly for children who have to work in, say, a noisy kitchen where the TV's on and they need some masking sound. Headphones and something very gentle, slow tempo, a little bit of birdsong in there, you will have noticed. Not surprising coming from me. We hope very much that's going to make a contribution to working at home, not to be used in schools, but it moves the debate on again. Thank you very much.